Good morning and welcome to A View from the House. My name is Mkokeli Tanda. In our program this morning, we hear about the performance of Defense Force troops on the borders. And we look at a question to the Minister of Police about the lease periods for buildings used by the South African Police Services. Let's go to our first item. The South African National Defense Force plans to have all borders under its protection by 2014. This assurance came from the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Lindiwe Sisulu, to a question in Parliament. She responded to a question by the ANC's Ms. Pamela Daniels. Ms. Daniels asked whether she had made an assessment of the effectiveness of the South African National Defense Force in safeguarding the borders. Ms. Sisulu said assessments of the military deployment along South Africa's border line were being done regularly. The department also got a feedback from communities and other stakeholders.
In our phased approach, we prioritized the Mozambique borderline for the reason that this is the most porous and the threat that is posed, especially to the endangered species, the rhinos. And I wanted to take this opportunity, Deputy Speaker, to indicate part of our successes with this message, which I received last night from Minister Edna Mulewa, one of our stakeholders as Minister of Environment. She SMSes me, "Dear Comrade Lindy, good evening. I've been suspecting that we have an inside job in this rhino poaching matter. My suspicion has been turned true. I wish to thank you and your special task force that is deployed at the Kruger Park over and above the border patrol team that you have. Our appreciation is done and due today because we have arrested 5 of our employees for killing 2 rhinos and stealing their horns." And I want to add that appropriate action has been taken by the minister internally, as well as the fact that this matter has been given over to the police.
The minister said since taking over the responsibility of border control, much had been achieved. The scorecard included the recovery of stolen vehicles and livestock and the arrests of thousands of illegal immigrants.
We have recovered livestock, the totality of which is 1,435, which is a real relief for those farming communities along our borders. In the last 18 months, we have recovered 76 stolen vehicles, and this, I am certain, has brought down the level of hijacking because we've closed off the route from which these cars were driven through to our bordering areas. We have confiscated contraband goods to the value of 81 million rands. We have arrested 35,000 illegal immigrants, and out of those, the genuine refugees we have redirected to declare themselves at the proper border posts. In areas where the SANDF is deployed, the soldiers are helping the local communities with building and renovating of community infrastructures, churches, schools, etc. So in looking over and assessing the impact that we've had, I'm very satisfied that the decision we took to go back to the borders was a very good one.
Ms. Pamela Daniels said she was impressed with the effectiveness of the border control, but the availability of resources was still a concern.
All that I have not heard, Honorable Minister, is whether you have enough capacity and resources to make sure that we ensure that our borderline is secured.
No, the reason why we took on a phased approach is precisely because we do not have the necessary capacity, nor do we have the resources to cover the entirety of the borderline, because we do not have the money. And the money is allocated by Parliament. I think that is the silliest question I've ever had to respond to. We do not have the money. We now cover 3 priority areas, and we're hoping that we will go on to the 4th one by the end of this year. What is good about this approach and the work that is being carried out at the borders is we're able to incorporate the reserves who otherwise would not have been employed. So far, we've taken on and employed 15,000 reserves, providing 15,000 households who need jobs with a much-needed income.
There were a number of follow-up questions. we pick up on the question of the DA Shadow Minister of Defense, Mr. David Mania, who first had a compliment for the minister.
I must, before I ask my question, compliment the Minister on her dazzling outfit this afternoon. Our Speaker, we support the deployment of the South African National Defence Force on our borders, and we recognize that what the Defence Force has achieved on our borders. But the fact is, we are not serious about safeguarding South Africa's borders, because we have more bodyguards protecting South Africa's ministers and their mansions than we have soldiers protecting South Africa's borders. We have 16,722 police protecting South Africa's ministers, but we only have 1,050 soldiers protecting South Africa's borders. It's a monstrous political scandal, and so I ask the Minister, does she agree, in the light of these shocking facts, that what we really need is to ramp up the deployment of the South African National Defence Force on our borders beyond the 1,650 soldiers she envisages in this financial year?
We're here on a very serious matter of protecting the integrity of this country. I do not have time for grandstanding and ranting and raving. Thank you very much.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
What's your point of order?
Once again, the Minister is not answering a question. The ministers are in this house to answer questions. And she talks about grandstanding. If that wasn't grandstanding, I haven't seen grandstanding. Could you please order the minister to answer the question?
The question that came across from the heckling was, why are we not covering more of the borders? We do not have the resources. We do not have the funds. If we had the funds to do that, we would by now have covered the entirety of our borders. That is my responsibility. If I had the money, I would be there. Now, you are bringing in a matter that has nothing to do with defense. That question that you are posing to me is directed at the Minister of Police and not me. I am answering on defense. If you give the money, we will be there, and you can stop being a jack in the box and sit down.
There was indeed a question to the Minister of Police, not about border control though, but about the lease periods for the buildings the police occupy. We'll look at the response to that question after the break. Stay with us.